The literature review. I used Dr. Keegan's paper on oil prices and foreign returns in emerging markets. She used Turkey as an example. Turkey, unlike Russia, is not an oil exporter. She found mixed results, as well as Dr. Kamal's paper. The impact of oil prices shocks on output. We used the 5 ASEAN countries and the long run effects of them.
That's BASNET, not A, okay? That's fine, whatever. That's okay.
I copied it right from the paper, so you spelled it wrong.
Can't hear you.
And also the last paper I used was Narayan and Sharma's 2004 paper on the evidence on oil price and firm returns. That paper was based on analyzing oil price change contributions to volatility on the New York Stock Exchange firm returns. The data I used was off of data stream, and I used Reuters Russia, the sectorial index, as well as Reuters NYSEX 100, which was a general Russian stock market, as well as the Brent crude oil price, which just shows the oil prices. The data span is from April 6, 2007 until April 6, 2017. That's a span of about 11 years. And each observation was taken daily. In particular, we looked at mining, energy, bank investment, and oil industries. The two equations. The first one is basically the return of each stock. And the second one is the return of each stock with a lag effect. The lag effect is basically if the oil price changes at 9 p.m., the stock market doesn't open until the next day to see if there's an effect on that the following day. The first graph, as you can see, shows the oil price, the daily Brent crude oil price. And if you compare it to the second graph between the years of 2008 and 2010, right here, this line is greatly correlated with this line right here. And also, the U.S. Hit a financial crisis in late 2007 or 2008, and the start of the decrease is right at 2008. So the U.S. also has an impact on Russia's oil prices. But it is also important to note for future research that when this decreased in late 2014 and 2015, the same effect did not happen on the NYSEX stock price index. And these are the returns of each stock. The return of the oil price versus the return of the NYSEX 100. These, of course, are greatly correlated with this. So the returns are positive on one another. And then again, at the end of the graph, there's a much bigger return over here than Russia's stock market in general. Okay, so the first, as I mentioned, the first equation earlier, just shows the estimation results with the returns without the lag effect. The most impacted was the bank investment. Usually you would think that the oil industry would be most impacted, but they were a close second, and then with energy right behind them. And then this is with the lag effect. As you can see, there was no change between them. So the lag did not have an effect on the estimation results. And then these are the plots. This is the return of the NYSEX, and then this is the return of the oil price. They are both positively correlated, except the second one is a slight smaller number on the return in percentages. And then in conclusion, we did discover that oil prices do have a large effect on the Russian stock index, and that's greatly due to them being an exporting country. Banking investment was the most largely impacted out of all the indexes, as well as energy, mining, and oil. The fluctuation of oil prices impacts the stock market in Russia, even with the stocks that are not related to oil. And like I said, this is due to them being an exporting country. As Dr. Kagan mentioned in her paper, there was no correlation because Russia is an importer, Turkey is an importer rather than being an exporting country. And for future research, we would like to add the interest and exchange rate to the models, as well as the March effect to control generosity in the models.
Daily or monthly or quarterly?
Observations? Yeah, they were each taken daily from 2007 until 2017. That's why there was a total of about 2,600 observations. Yes.
So if you wanted to crater the Russian economy, what should the U.S. do as far as production of oil?
That's a great question. Great for further research, but in my personal opinion,
That's a great answer.
I don't think, but I personally don't think that we should, shy away from Russia. We should still keep importing their oil because we don't want to waste all of our resources. With the growing population we have, we can't just rely on our own resources. We have to rely on other countries' resources as well.
Can we answer one?
Yeah.
With the rise of solar energy, what effects do you see that having on Russia or even the United States as far as importing and Russia exporting?
Like I said earlier, the U.S. economy did impact Russia, so I completely understand where you're coming from with the energy sector. I do think that they would have a negative impact on their market because we would not be importing as much oil as we do right now.
And in your data, did you find anything as far as Russia doing anything to counterbalance that to sort of prepare themselves for, moving over to solar or sustainable energy sources?
No, we're not actually looking into that yet. But that is for the research as well, looking at this rise of solar energy. Yes.
So oil works for Russia, and how come it doesn't work for Venezuela?
Russia is also, with Putin being in charge, I feel like he has a greater effect. He can, their exports are taken in by a lot of countries, as well as Venezuela is a smaller country, and people don't really go to Venezuela first for oil, let's say. They may go to Russia, as well as the OPEC countries first. That's it.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
All right, good.
Surprise, Al. Remember, don't be a gamer. Why is it not? Yeah. We can see any more ready. Hope you like baseball. Any Mets fans? Yeah, okay. The door's that way. So Sean is also a sports management major, and we suffered together through sports economics last spring, and as a result from that course and certain other activities, you see the genesis here of actually that was the genesis of his topic, reconstructing Bill James, and I will speak to you through something. So go for it. You should.
Good morning, everyone. As Dr. Mark said, I'm Sean Kinsa, and in this thesis, we try to reconstruct Bill James by examining his diagram and formula and see if we can improve upon Same agenda, careful. So if anybody here watches baseball, they know sometimes they throw out weird statistics like on night games on Thursdays when it's raining, he's 5 for 10, like in his career, and they just throw out weird statistics like that. But baseball really is a statistics-heavy sport where it's just where it dives even deeper than just simply average and hits, and home runs. There's so many new statistics being made consistently. Bill James is considered the godfather of these advanced statistics. He coined the term sabermetrics for the Society for American Baseball Research, which is SABR. He started in 1977. He published his own abstracts about baseball and new statistics. And in 1980 was the abstract that held the Pythagorean formula, which is right here on the bottom, which is using runs scored and runs allowed to determine the winning percentage for teams. Many sites actually use this predictor for their own projections on the season. So when they are done deciding how many runs a team's going to score using their own algorithms, they input those into the Pythagorean formula to see what their record will be at the end of the year. Since it was created in 1980, a lot of things have changed within the game of baseball. And so we were trying to see if we could improve upon it, mainly using a random forest, which I'll get into later. Some lit review. Moneyball, big movie with Brad Pitt. It was a book by Michael Lewis about the Athletics of the early 2000s that really was the first team to adopt these advanced sabermetrics to their scouting practices. Father Baseball Henry Chadwick created a box score, which if anyone reads the newspaper and sees just games scores, the box score is a staple at the turn of the 20th century. In the 1950s, sabermetrics was actually used for the first time for Jackie Robinson. Actually, they used on-base percentage to show that he would be an asset to the Dodgers, and that's one of the main reasons he was actually chosen as the player to break the color barrier. Chuck Latin Summers retested his theorem using natural logarithms and actually ended up changing the exponent that you see there from 2 to 1.94, but they only did it from 1980 to 2005. So that's a different window from what Bill James used to create his. And we are testing from 2000 to 2015 because the game has changed so much since then with the steroid era of the 90s. So basically 2000 to 2015, we're trying to see if there's been a predictor going forward. And obviously finally the baseball abstract by Bill James, which in which you can see the Pythagorean formula. So the data section from SeanLehman.com, he has a set of data beginning in 1871 from every single team, for every statistic that you see on the right side there. We only use 2000 to 2015. If we want to go 1871 to 2015, very ambitious and could probably be used for future research. But we want to see right now what would be a better predictor. Some newer statistics weren't necessarily available for the study, like on-base percentage averaged out for the leagues and wins above replacement, some newer statistics that have basically only been used the last 5 years. So there are 480 total observations with these 30 teams over the past 16 years. So the random forest, which is what I was talking about earlier, that we were going to use to see if we could create a better predictor, it basically creates importance statistics for each of the variables and tells you how important each variable is to the the dependent variable, which is winning percentage in this case. So obviously wins and losses would be the most obvious one, and run differential is also a very important statistic. So basically what random forest will do is kind of branch off with those variables and basically create a final recombination of sorts. And so in our results here, we ran through the each of the regressions, and using them, we're measuring using root mean square error, which is the measure of the differences between the values predicted by the regression by the anything. Formulas, I guess. And the observed values that are created through the models. The rainforest was beaten by Bill James, even though his formula is 37 years old. It still holds up today. There's a reason that all these projection sites still use it. Using the 1.94 statistic that Chocolate and Summers created and found that was slightly better. It is slightly better than the Pythagorean formula over the last 16 years. And we kind of chose a random variable to see maybe if there was a better one, and actually 1.8 was more successful than the original Pythagorean formula and the 1.94. So what does that mean? So basically, Pythagorean formula still holds up today. It's fantastic. Statistics have been changing so much over the past few decades that there's really so much more that can be done moving forward. Unfortunately, as I stated earlier, there are a lot of statistics that have been created that haven't been fully kept. So since, like, wins above replacement has been used for player statistics specifically. And it's really tough to measure that completely because there are different methods to measure wins above replacement. So there's no stable for it yet. So we can't really use that to measure something else. As baseball moving forward has so many different statistics. There's going to be so many different chances to test. And even as more methods become created, like random forest is a fairly new measure, we will probably be able to see a better predictor for the formula itself. And obviously the 1.8, which is kind of just a shot in the dark to begin with, moving forward we could test to see why exactly the 1.8 was more successful than the 1.94 exponent or the original exponent.
Suggesting that an old guy is better.
Right now, yes.
So you mentioned the steroid era in the 90s. Was there a specific reason you picked 2000 as opposed to 1998? The two was that when kind of the PED testing came into force?
There was no reason. Yeah, I didn't want to have too small of a period because the steroid era, some people claim it goes till 2006. Some people say it ended in the early 2000s. So it's not a definite period. But with 16 years, I felt it was a good amount of time to really see what the game has been over the past decade and a half and moving forward, what it could be used as a predictor.
In the future, just as a recommendation, it's nice to do something like if there is a new collective bargaining agreement or a new type of PED testing regime to use that as a cutoff as opposed to just a year.
You think with the baseball statistics you said you were not able to put in there, you expect random forest to perform better or not?
Moving forward, I do think that it is because it's easier to evaluate players with those newer statistics. So seeing that moving forward and being able to truly evaluate someone rather than just pure average or pure home runs or RBIs and run that in, then they can tell more of the story with a single statistic rather than using 10 or 15 different statistics.
Can you apply other model under your name later for another area, like maybe tennis?
Maybe, because I know in the big four sports, they use a variation of the model. In football, they have this model, and they have another fraction that they use along with it. In basketball, they essentially use the same model just with a different exponent. And in hockey, they're still testing it, but recent tests have shown around 2.5 is the exponent. So a lot of the big sports do use it, and I'm sure it can be applied to other sports as well.
Why is it called the Pythagorean?
Because of the use of the 3 squared. Where is it? Oh, there it is. The 3 squared numbers within the equation. Yes. I did not know that until I read his section.
Other questions? Thank you.
I forgot that this pointed. That would have been a lot easier.
Yeah, the circles down here. This is. Choose.
Alright, so another crazy report here. Okay. Another great paper, it's the effect of children on family income, and our presenter is Vanessa Lopez. So my study was to test for statistical significance between children and family income. And I also took it a step further to test if there was a motherhood penalty. So we tested for children on family income. And my hypothesis was just that children inevitably cause interruptions in the workforce and in the educational process. And those are two essential things for higher earnings. And also, what becomes an issue is child daycare services and flexibility in job roles. So with my lit review, prior academic research showed a lot of motherhood penalties. They used data from 1960s and all through 1990s. They used a different model methodology than I did. They used the fixed effects, so they followed a small sample size for quite some time. So what I did was a linear regression model. So I did that, and for the data section methodology, you see that linear regression, and these are the results. Well, these are the descriptive, oh my God, I can't speak. Descriptive statistics, there you go. Okay, so the dependent variable is the family income, and we had a total of 3,243 observations. Where did you get the data? Oh, yes, I was getting there. Sorry, my slides, my index cards. So I got the data from the current population survey. It's from 2016. So that's what I did differently. I try to get more relevant data that's more recent to see what we can get with more relevant numbers. So with this data, all the observations are full-time employees. And so I used 8 variables. I used marital status, parental status, education level, race, and I used 3 regions, which were South, North, East, Midwest, and West. And these are the results once I ran the regression, and I have here in bold that there is a child's effect on family income, and it negatively affects family income by 4% annually, since the family income is measured in a 12-month period. And then you see in bold that female does not have a statistical significant relationship with family income. And what that tells me is that gender does not play a role in family income, which is a good thing.
And then I did the results with the interaction variable, and this is to test if there was a motherhood penalty. And it shows no statistical significance as well. So I ran through these slides very quickly. So in conclusion, what I found was that gender doesn't play a role in family income, as prior research has shown that it does affect wages. So also households with children have an estimated average of earning 4% less, like I mentioned before. And what this says is that the women observations in my data are not leaving the workforce, since they're all full-time employees. And then for future research, what I would like to switch up would be I would like to look at wages to get a better gauge at the child effect, since I only had to do the family income. And the limits with that was with family income, it was through a survey, and people in a survey tend to overestimate how much they make around, or sometimes underestimate for privacy reasons. And with the family income in a household, I don't know which partner contributes how much. And I also don't know if all households are heterosexual, so that plays a role in my data. And then also I would like to add more variables into my linear regression that play a role on family income. And that is it. Any questions? Sure.
So it's interesting that you said women are not leaving the workforce, but did you take a look at the male relationship?
I did.
In terms of men leaving the workforce?
Yeah, so no, so all of these are full-time employees with children and without children. So they're all in the workforce before and after they have children. And I know that is interesting. So where I would answer that question, because I thought about it too, so who's taking care of the kids, is that whoever answered the survey, we don't know what their spouse is doing. We don't know if they're staying home or if they're working as well. They reported the family income for both of them. So that's where I have a flaw in the data. Yes, Dan?
So with the possibility of adopting universal income in our society, are you saying then that we would have to take the same approach that the Chinese, or actually they stopped doing it, but would we have to limit the amount of children that every household would be allowed to? Do you know what I mean? So
I do know what you mean. I don't think we would have to take that, seeing that we're not leaving the workforce. But
if let's say we're losing jobs, right, to machine learning and artificial intelligence and basically robots,
right,
and we have to adopt universal income, which is basically the government providing a family with a stipend every month. If that stipend is set at, let's say, $4,000 or $3,000, then would you say that we would then have to limit the amount of children that people can have unless they want to take on an additional job?
I mean, that's a good question that I can't answer for you right now. That would be for future research. I think that's an interesting question.
We'll talk about it later.
Yes, Dr. Morley.
So families that have children about 4% less on average. Do you have any idea, just from what you've seen in the data, whether that is the children causing wages to go down, or it's just adults who decide to have children value work less, and so they would be making less money even if they didn't have kids?
To be honest with you, I honestly just think that families, because the thing is, with my theory when I got the results were that these households are all full-time employees. So I think that the households with children are working less hours but still full-time versus the households without children who have more flexibility to take on longer hours at work and able to travel and do things that require higher pay scale or a job that is more demanding. So that's my theory.
That's
What?
that's the thing.
Less demand, yes, sorry. Any other questions?
Do you control for religion or regional effects or anything like that? In other words, if you find this effect, abate or increase in the south or the southwest?
Oh, yeah. So I used the South as a comparison. So the Midwest, Northeast, and West family income is affected much more negatively than the South. which is interesting. And I think that when I was running it through my classmates, they mentioned the cost of living being an effect on that. So that would be for future research.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work.
We're halfway through, so popular demand, we'll take a potty break. Be back in 10 minutes, 9:05. Thank you. Okay, God.
It's something that I think sounds
It's being live streamed. Yeah, where's the link? It's on the Facebook page.
Okay, everyone, we are going to kick off to our next one. So we had an opportunity to talk about Russia, Trump administration, Putin. Sticking with that theme, I'd like to introduce Josh. Josh has been another student who suffered through me more than once. He's also has a strong interest, as you'll see, in political science, but he is an economics major, and showing how both economics and political science are really inextricably intertwined. And you need a strong foundation in economics to really understand politics and the political environment. And from there, Josh, it's all yours.
All right. So as you said, I'm Josh Willets. My paper is titled Election 2016, the Comey Letter. Essentially what I'm, so pretty much I was looking at the Comey Letter, pretty much trying to, sort of reaffirm its effect that it had on the election. Here's everyone's agenda that we all follow. So to sort of give a little bit of a timeline, as most of you know, for the 2016 election, for pretty much almost the entire election, Clinton had a lead in the polls. I believe for a long time, I believe she had double-digit leads over Trump. And then on October 28th, 2016, James Comey, the director of the FBI, sent a letter to Congress basically saying that he was potentially going to reopen the Clinton email case. Those of you who aren't aware, basically she had a private email server and there's questions about classified documents and whether or not she was breaking laws by using the server. The FBI had concluded that there wasn't enough evidence to do an investigation, but then they found new emails from an unrelated case involving Anthony Weiner sending nude photographs to a 15-year-old girl, I think, again. So they found some potential emails during that case that could reopen the case. From October 29th to November 7th, after the letter came out, Clinton still maintained as the favorite in the polls. However, as we'll see, she did take a hit. But she was still, everyone still said on November 7th, Clinton is going to be the next president. However, as we all know, November 8th, Donald Trump is elected the 45th president of the United States. So essentially what I wanted to look at was whether or not we could use Google Trends data in order to predict whether or not the level of impact that Comey's letter actually had, that the polls really weren't able to predict as accurately. So the literature review, as I mentioned, I use Google Trends data. I'll kind of go into more about the data itself a little bit. So these are the main papers I used in order to justify. Choi and Barry in 2011, they came out with a paper using Google Trends data in order to predict various economic activity in the very short term, within like 2-week periods, how certain policies worked. And they found that analyzing Google Trends data had a smaller error rate than more traditional economic analysis. So they coined the term sort of predicting the present. Since it was such short-term work, they could really predict what was going to happen within these very small time frames more accurately than other analysis methods. In 2014, Davis and Rodriguez, they came out with a paper analyzing the level of, in Connecticut, there was a decline in enrollment in MBA programs. So they did a shift share analysis, which is a fancy technique to show that Connecticut's MBA program was lagging behind the nation. And so they did that and showed the correlation. Then they also used Google Trends data and saw that there was a lower level of interest in MBA programs shown in the Google data basically drew the same correlations from that data. 2014, this was one really interesting papers that I read. Stevens-Dawidowitz, he came out with a paper and he was analyzing whether or not there was a racial bias against Obama during his 2008-2012 elections. And he used Google Trends data to use that. The main reason he used Google Trends data was because he basically said that polling data would be inaccurate for this kind of research. You know, if you go up to someone and basically ask them, are you not going to vote for Obama because you're racist? You're not going to get accurate results. You can't ask people, are you racist on the phone and traditional polling methods, because you're not going to get honest answers. What he used Google Trends data for various, what he deemed racially charged search terms. Basically any search term related to the N-word that, could be translated into racist terminology. So then basically he was able to show that there was a racial bias against Obama in certain regions. He compared basically John Kerry to Obama for the two time periods. And then in 2016, Sam Wang of the Princeton Election Consortium, he coins the Comey effect. Basically what he saw was that after the Comey letter came out, he was basically able to prove that there was an impact in the polls. And he compared that to an announcement about Obamacare, about premium hikes being increased. That didn't have an impact, but the Comey letter did, basically saying that the Comey letter had at least a more immediate impact in polling. So for my data selection methodology, I used 4 different search terms in 5 locations: Anthony Weiner, Clinton investigation, Comey Clinton, and Comey letter. Basically, these were just search terms all related to the letter itself, with obviously the letter being the main one looking at. And then the 5 locations I chose are Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, DC, and California. The first 3 I chose were I chose those first 3 because they were the primary swing states in the election. Everyone thought that they were most likely going to be going to Clinton. November 8th happens and Trump swept all 3. I also chose DC and California because they were always going to be set for Clinton. It was extremely unlikely that they would ever swap. I just wanted to see if there was an effect in there as well. The time frame I chose was October 27th to November 9th, basically the day before the letter came out to the day after the election, just to kind of get a full two-week span on the data. And this is the fun little regression equation I used, the natural log of the volume index regressed against time. So what do I mean by volume index? This is a sample chart of my data. This is just for the search term Comey Clinton. So as you see here, there's all the dates, and this is the 5 locations. So what we have here is that this is basically, I use the term percent level of interest, is essentially what we're looking at. So when we see here, this 100, that is in the state of Pennsylvania on October 30th, that was the highest level of interest out of all 5 locations that people had in the search term Comey Clinton. So for example, down here on November 5th, there's 32 in Wisconsin. Basically in Wisconsin on the 5th, they had 32% the level of interest that Pennsylvania did on the 30th. It can be a little bit tricky to look at this, but it's sort of, it's basically comparing all the data amongst the different locations and their level of interest. So just some notes that I found based, sort of looking at the Comey effect. Here's a graph of the level of interest for the Comey letter. And this is polling data from Real Clear Politics, which is basically the aggregate of, basically a bunch of different polling systems. And this is specifically for Michigan. What we see here, so this is Clinton's lead. This is Trump's, positive polling data. And this, black section down here is basically the difference over time. And as we see here, there's a large spread and it declines. And we see that happening after a large spike in interest of the Comey letter. Again, in Pennsylvania, the Comey letter happens around here. few days later, the polls come out, decline with a spike in the Comey letter interest over here. And again, we see the same thing a little bit sooner in Wisconsin. Here I have two graphs, and I kind of offset them to make it a little bit more interesting to look at. So in order to do the regression, I have to take the natural log of the volume index in order to sort of take care of any skewness and all sorts of errors that get fixed by taking the natural log data. And essentially what I found, so these were just for the Comey letter and Comey Clinton. I also did this for Anthony Weiner and Clinton investigation. Basically similar graphs. What we see here, so each different color dot represents a different state. It's sort of hard to see on here. But so essentially what we see though in the Comey letter, we see an increase, drop, increase, drop. And then again up here, we see an increase, a drop, a little bit of an increase, and a drop again. Basically what we're seeing here is that the data, the letter comes out on day 2. Over the next few days, we have a lot of interest. Then it starts to decline. Then before election day, interest is reopened. People start looking at it again a few days before the election. When I did the regression, lots of fancy terms, lots of fancy things. We have the p-value, I use the significance level of 0.01. Essentially, any of these p-values that are larger than 0.01, the variable is insignificant, and the main variable I'm using is time. For Anthony Weiner and Clinton investigation, in only one instance each is time a significant variable. Basically, what this means is that the level of interest cannot be explained by the passage of time. What you would expect is that, as time goes on, people will stop caring about the letter, these are all negative coefficients by the parentheses. Basically, as time goes on, you would expect a decrease in interest. However, time is not significant here, meaning that something else had to be impacting the level of interest in this topic. And in Comey Clinton, Comey letter, absolutely in no instance is time a significant variable. Just to sort of show a little bit about why I care a little bit more about Comey Clinton and the Comey letter as opposed to the other two, Anthony Weiner and the Clinton investigation. Here we see just a large increase in search term for Anthony Weiner, and it declines over time. And then there's a little increase over here, but this is the day after the election, so it's not really impacting the election itself. So looking from this time frame, time is due to this increase over here. My hypothesis is that this initial interest in the search term is why time is insignificant. However, when we look at the Comey letter and Comey Clinton, we see a large increase, a decrease, then increase again, and then increase again before the election actually happens. So in terms of all the search terms, time is insignificant. I feel that Comey letter and Comey Clinton show a little bit more about the interest in the letter itself, while the other two search terms are just more broad about the initial impact. Basically, my conclusion is that since time is not the explanatory variable for level of interest, something else has to happen. And essentially, my theory is that since people were looking up the Comey letter over the course of this time period, people in states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, that caused people to potentially vote for Trump. In terms of future research, what I would want to be looking is at California and DC to see if Clinton's margin of victory was smaller than Obama's, due to the Comey letter, because I found that the Comey letter was significant in those states, but Clinton still won. So I think further research would be able to check to see whether or not, her margin of victory was the same. Other further research is looking at media coverage of the Comey letter. Basically look at these states and say how, is Fox News the most popular news source in Michigan, and how did they cover the Comey letter, and did that impact voters' decision? Other analysis is specifically looking at Twitter and Facebook and looking at how people are sharing about these certain topics. I mentioned here other events in the election using the same Google Trends data. You can look up the basket of deplorables and see remember if you all remember that statement, perhaps that also had an impact. Overall, basically, the Comey letter did have an impact, and we can't use Google Trends to predict that sort of impact. So, any questions?
Under future research, have you ever thought about the concept of whether or not Comey's announcements were appropriate or not? He's being criticized for that.
Yeah.
And the question I ask is, in relation to that, was he or not appropriate? What if Hillary Clinton was not a candidate? What if she was just Secretary of State?
Mm-hmm.
How would that have affected Comey's announcement or not?
I think that's definitely an interesting place to go into further research. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think, based on this data, I had no, how that would actually impact based off of this. But I think, that's definitely something that can be looked into. There's definitely methods you can probably look into that.
I'm glad you're thinking about that.
Have you read Nate Silver's piece on this that came out maybe 2 weeks ago?
I have not yet.
Okay, definitely. So Nate Silver at 538 just wrote a really big article that asks this exact same question and comes to a similar conclusion. So that's it. Good.
How does Google get their trend data?
Essentially, they're just collecting it from people who use their search engine. Basically, they can, their terms of service say that they can track, how often these search terms are.
Oh, so they're doing it by search. So
Yeah, this is
strictly by.
This is basically people
keeps
Googling.
all that data.
Josh, that 1% threshold from 0 to 1.
Yeah.
That's pretty strict. I mean, if you upped it to 2.05, is it a slam dunk? It is.
To 0.05, I think I was looking at that, and I think maybe 3 more become significant, but out of 20, I still don't think that really changes.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Josh.
So I also need to thank Josh. Josh and I have been talking about this for quite some time. And before the election, as Josh probably remember, on October 21, we did a map, and we had Hillary Clinton winning. And then on November 4th, we had Donald Trump winning. So that's, and this was following the Comey letter as well. So Josh's research really explored that in further detail as opposed to a visceral computer someone's stomach just rubbing.
You were ahead of the meeting.
So you delivered everyone's, Miles.
I think it's still.
It's on the flash drive elsewhere.
Nate, you're up.
No, mine's the one with my name.
Let me take a moment to introduce Miles. He wanted very badly to write about Kilo, and our focus is on empirical stuff. I really couldn't come up with something empirical that was manageable. Anyway, I told him he could talk here about Kilo, kind of to motivate that, if anything, because it is a huge court decision that had repercussions across the nation. And it is here in Connecticut, so it's worth it perhaps if you could talk a little bit about that in your introduction. Thank you, Miles.
Thank you, everybody.
I want to start off with a few thank yous. I want to say thank you for Dean Kench for coming and joining us today. I'd like to thank my capstone class for getting through this with me. I want to thank 7-Eleven for, no matter how late it was, always serving me pizza. I want to thank the Frisbee team. For those of you who don't know, I'm the president of the Frisbee team. My vice president actually joined me today. I want to thank them for working so hard and making it to regionals. So I lost a weekend to work on this. So I had to pull all-nighters all week, so that was fun. I would like to thank the Kohl's discount rack for having this suit. I would like to thank 744 for their patience in dealing with us when we went out for dinners to discuss thesis things, and that one waiter who's really cool to us, not the other one. And I would also like to thank the econ department for putting on a great party last night, but also putting up with me for 4 years and really helping me get to this point. Your support has been just unbelievable, and I really appreciate it, and I thank you all. I'd like to specifically thank Dr. Marks for his help in my development as an economist, and if you have an opportunity to take game theory, please do so. It is my favorite class here. I'd also like to thank A-Rod, who started off in my life a few years ago as just a crazy guy who came in and started yelling about econ stuff. But you're my academic advisor, you're my thesis advisor, and you're one of my best friends. I love you, A-Rod. And I would also like to thank my parents for all the support you guys have given me. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, and all this work was for you guys. And on a final note, I would like to ask everyone that you hold your questions until the next presentation. Without further ado, this is my thesis class on determination of urban development, West Haven, and case study. So here's my agenda. I'm going to start off the welcome, a few jokes. Introduction, background literature, data and data model, results, conclusion, and implications. Start off, when I first started meeting with A-Rod about this, he always said that there were two kinds of theses. There were the great ones, and there were the finished ones. And until this morning, I had a great thesis. So to start off, the Haven, for those of you who don't know, is a mall that they plan on developing down First Ave, that way. It's on the water. And it's going to be it's the first high-end waterfront mall in the country. And they announced it on June 2014, and I have $3 million there because the city expects both $3 million in tax revenue from the project, and their target audience was 3 million people within a 50-mile radius of West Haven, and they want to attract at least 10% of those. They were expecting to start building in March 2015, and they were expected to be completed this past fall. That has not been the case. The lot still remains undeveloped, and as of a few days ago, I looked up, there are 4 properties still in court trying to keep their land because they enacted eminent domain to try to seize the properties. So eminent domain is when the government wants to do something for the common good of the community, and they say, hey, we need your property, so here's what we deem market value, get out. So that's what they've been trying to do. That's been battling out in court. Because people are trying to keep their homes and their businesses. This picture is actually the meeting of West Haven Mayor Ed O'Brien with Sheldon Gordon, the developer, and the investor Tom Miller, and they're discussing the plans. And like everybody brought up, Kilo versus New London. So that was a really big case. I had to do, it was I believe, I don't know exactly, but basically Pfizer is in New London and they wanted to expand their operations. So they tried to work out a deal with some of the homeowners nearby. And when they were unable to reach a conclusion, the government used eminent domain to seize their properties. And it basically got battled out in court and they lost because the government said that it was for the good of the community, as Pfizer made the case that they were going to create jobs and increase tax revenue, much like what's going on here. So that was a really controversial case. And actually, when I was in 4th grade, I didn't really know it at the time, but I was actually at a protest against Pfizer. I'm really mad I brought in like a no that I actually stole from the protest, but I left it in the car. But just imagine holding a big no. So that was a really cool thing. And at the time, my sister actually worked for Pfizer, so it got really controversial. But, so here's some of the literature I reviewed. A lot of different things, but these three specifically had very similar topics to what I did. And they all, for the most part, had really differing results. So that was kind of weird. I didn't really expect that. I thought that property values would just go up. So, but a lot of these people found really conflicting results, which I'll get to in mine. Basically, so what I'm trying to do, so I chose Manchester as a control city to West Haven because there's similar demographics, similar median income, and geographically they're close enough as to where they would kind of have the same culture, the same attitudes towards things, but where Manchester would be unaffected by the announcement of the Haven. So these are the months from starting in 1996 all the way to February 2016, and this line right here is the announcement of the Haven. I got my data from Zillow.com, very useful. I didn't think they had public data. So these numbers here are the average single-family home prices. So I started off by trying to use a linear model to figure out whether there was a change. And when I went through it, it said that prices increased by $11,212, but the R squared, which is a term used basically to try to show the correlation between the variance in, so the variance was trying to explain when there's a change in something different from what it should have been, what percent of that is correlated to the factors that I attributed to it. And in this case, only 34% of the variance could be explained by the variables we used. So me and A-Rod decided to use difference in differences. So that's basically an attempt to try to just figure out this little white space and what the meaning behind it is. So this was the model we used. And then we used a dummy variable. So before the announcement of the mall, it was set to 0. And then when the mall was announced, it was set to 1. And so the results from that, we got an R squared of 66%, which shows that there's very good fit between variables I prescribed for it. And we found out that the average house price was $347 on average, which, I mean, isn't a lot, but it was also just based on the announcement of the mall. They didn't actually begin construction yet. If they had, I'm sure there would be a greater impact as there's more demand for the properties. But they haven't started yet, so they're really just going off the word of them. And considering how late it's been, I believe that it's so low because there wasn't enough confidence really in the actual finishing of the project. So we'll have to wait and see when they finish them all. I'll come back, that'll be part of my future research. Yeah, so then I found that there was statistical significance between the announcement of the Haven and increasing property values. I look forward to when they finish them all, when I can really analyze and see what happened again, run the same regression, and try to find out if there was a greater impact. All right, are there any questions? Yeah.
Do you have an idea if the announcement of the mall, how they're related to public knowledge of it existing? Do you have an idea if people already knew that was coming? Because my guess is, right, you always buy property before you actually make an announcement like that to try and get the next price.
I actually don't know because I've been looking around the internet and I hadn't found any articles really about it before the announcement at all. So I couldn't find any rumors about it. So I'm sure maybe a rumor spread, but it wasn't publicized at all. So I don't know how much of an effect they really played. So I didn't figure for it.
Is it a done deal now?
Is what a done deal.
All are they done?
There's still 4 properties up in court. So
Gas station.
yeah, I think one of them is the gas station.
Gas station at the corner of First and L.
Yeah.
Private homes.
So we got Kilo now. What's stopping?
Yeah.
What's stopping it?
I don't know.
Why can't we use Kilo?
I don't know. I mean, I was sitting there trying to, but I mean, I wouldn't want to leave my house either. And the big issue with the gas station was that the gas station that is up for, you know, and then up for season was that family's income for 3 generations. And their plan was to pass it down to their kids. So it's not just their house. The market value doesn't really deem it because you'd have to figure for all the income they would generate throughout the years. So I don't really think that's really fair. Yes.
Do the developers know at this time what retail outfits are going to be in?
Yeah.
Do they know already? Have they published that? to the community?
Yes, there's actually 3 different classifications for malls. There's A, B, and C. C is the lowest grade of mall, and A is the highest grade of mall. And this is actually going to be an A mall, so it's going to be very nice. And big, I have all the stores with the names that you can't pronounce. So it'll hopefully bring in a lot of good business.
What's the location? You mean that the building near IC, the one building?
The undeveloped lot all the way down First Ave on the water.
We're also looking to have a marina and restaurants.
Yeah, they are gonna have, they're gonna have a little pull up, they're gonna have a dock so you can go pull up on your boat, which I think will really bring in a lot of other people and bring in the clientele they're looking for.
They're going north of Elm Street now too, not just south, right? I'm pretty sure they bought all, they're trying to buy all the way.
Yeah, I think that's more for just space. I don't know if they're actually gonna expand the mall into that area, but yeah, part of that too.
UNH take a few lessons.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the data as far as do malls still generate a lot of revenue in today's world, you know, with e-commerce?
You know, I actually did look into that a little bit. The malls have been going down actually. A lot of people aren't going to malls because of e-commerce. A lot of malls are closing or selling their shops or whatever it is. So I don't know if that will really have an effect on this. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that will have.
How does that affect the Boston Post Mall? They must be loving hard to stop this one.
I don't believe so because that's like somewhere between a C and a B rated mall. So it's gonna be a lot nicer. So they're gonna have a completely different clientele. So like if you're going over there to stop in, go to Zoomies, you're not gonna take one stop at Zoomies and then go, oh, let me go pick up my Gucci bag. You know? So they're going for a completely different audience.
So your feeling is that given its demographics and focus, that this mall may not track comparable to B and C malls as far as what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, at least we're hoping, yeah.
So why can't we build a ballpark like they did in Hartford?
I don't know, because they built one in Hartford.
Yeah. Did you happen to study neighborhoods where developments have already been completed? Curious to see if values increasing in West Haven are simply because of speculation, and then after the property is developed, traffic increases, activity increases. In neighborhoods where that kind of activity was not actually.
I did actually in the literature review some of the papers there studied the effects of malls actually in certain areas, and they found an overwhelming majority that it does increase the property values. But there was a slight little disagreement on whether or not it was the overall value. So, like you said, the traffic, so that brings down the demand for those properties. So one of the papers I read found that the closer it is to the mall, prices actually go down. But as you get a little further away, they increase enough to offset that. So on average, it increases the mall. Or it depends on like the zoning you pick. So in my future research, I'd like to look into that as well. If I could find more accurate data, but this was the closest I could find. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you. Thanks. We had one
You
more.
said a 50-mile radius?
Yes.
That includes north of Long Island.
I would assume they don't mean, oh, well, since there's a marina, they could attract.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because half of it was Connecticut, and the rest is water, including northern Long Island,
Yes.
which could be worked into the clientele
Yeah.
that would make their way across and using the ferry.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice stuff.
Come on. Come on.
It's okay, come on, we can sing it back.
Okay. Good morning, come on for that again. Few orders, now he's trying to become a macroeconomist, okay? That's why he's writing paper on demand for money in the United States. His particular focus is going to be in terms of effect of financial crisis, the effect of financial crisis on demand for money in the US.
Thank you, Short Tone.
my project on the demands for money in the United States after the financial crisis, the most recent one. It's the agenda. So in 2008, 2009, there was a financial crisis in the US. So this graph's important. This is the velocity of money. So it's important to distinguish between like the amount of money, like GDP, and the velocity. So the velocity is like the movement of the money. How much is $1 spent? Like how much does it move and how much is it spent? This is the model I used. So velocity equals nominal GDP divided by M2. M2 is like it's broad money, so it's stocks or bonds. Lit review, Slavokas, 2016. So he did a very similar thing to what my paper's on, except it was with Croatia. Now, like the only issue with that is that to get help after their financial crisis, they joined the EU in 2013. So when you join the EU, with that, the other countries agree to kind of like support everybody. And I mean, I guess anything can happen, but we can't join the EU to do that. The other lit review I did was on Kapunik, and his didn't look at any financial crisis as much as it just looked at actual common monetary policy in the EU, which is still a little different than ours, but it was similar enough to give me a general idea. So all the data is taken between 1985 and 2015, which there's no specific reason I picked 1985, but you need to go back far enough before the financial crisis so you can put your dummy variable at 0 and then actually see the effect of the financial crisis after 2008. So here's all my variables. FC is financial crisis, is a dummy variable. So you have to set it to 0 before the financial crisis happened. So before I set it at 2008, you could have put it at 2009. I guess technically you put it at 2007, but it wasn't in the full swing, so you wouldn't get the true like meaning of the dummy variable. So before 2008, my dummy variable is 0. Financial crisis didn't happen yet. After 2008, it's 1. So E, these are important to talk about. So E is exchange rate. So my exchange rates, it's an index. So it's not weighted against a specific other currency. It's weighted against a bunch of currencies. So that one I had to pull from the World Bank. But the rest of them, you all get off. For interest rates, I had to use the 10-year treasury rate. So that just means when you look at the data, if I bought the bond, we'll say in 1985, what will the payout be 10 years from now? That's how you get the interest rate. So with this test, so this is a Dickey-Fuller test. Well, that explains what I use, but this is a Dickey-Fuller test. And when I first ran it, I got like an R squared of 99%, which I suppose is possible, but there's too many variables in a topic like this for the couple that I picked to explain 99% of the variation in the demand for money. So you have to take the first difference, and that shows you. So the first difference is just you take the data you have, you subtract it, and then you take that number, and that's the number that you then put into the Dickey-Fuller test. So here, so this is 43. So that is a more, like, that's what you would expect. So that means that 43% change in my demand for money is explained by the variables that I used. So I found that interest rate played the biggest role in the demand for money. So this might include, so yeah, interest rates are statistically significant, explain the demand for money, which is just like Slavokas said, but the only issue is that they had an option to join the EU in 2013. We don't have that issue. I looked at another paper in Venezuela, and that economist suggested that they could substitute their currency, which we also can't do because we're a big player in the world economy. So if we go into a financial crisis, that's why China's affected and other countries, same in China. Further work would be improved because the more time you have after the financial crisis, it shows you like more of the long run. So really the only way that happens is you have to let time go by so you can get that data. And that's it.
questions?
Can you elaborate? You said substituting currency.
So, like, I don't know, it would be like, instead of using the Venezuelan currency, the people there would agree that we're gonna use the US currency because it's a stronger currency. We can't do that because, well, we're the United States and we're a bigger country. So that's what that is. Like, smaller countries have that luxury of doing that until, like, maybe the inflation of their currencies like level down and they can switch back if they want. But
Just out of curiosity, I'm sure you didn't, but did you by any chance look into cryptocurrency or other alternative forms of, currency? Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of anything about Bitcoin or like.
Well, so yeah, I know what Bitcoin is.
That wasn't my question.
Yeah.
So, I guess you could, but I don't know. It's tough to say.
Yeah, because Bitcoin right now I think has like a market cap of 25 to 30.
It also varies, right? So, like.
Yeah, let me put it this way: we include the exchange rate, he included, not we. Okay, to ensure that if dollar becomes really, really weak,
Yes.
people switch from dollar. The people want to hold from as opposed to holding dollar from dollar to some other currency. So to capture that effect, he included the exchange rate in the model.
Got it.
And that exchange rate includes all the currencies, excluding the Bitcoin.
Oh, excluding. Okay.
It's an index.
Right.
It's an index.
I see. Understood.
Thank you.
So the Greeks going back to the drachma? Are they? You said the small countries could move to the euro. Can they move back?
No. I don't know. Like, the issue, like, with our country is that we are too big, and also we're usually the people to like bail other countries out. Like, no one can. I mean, I guess they could, but no one's really going to bail us out. Like, we can't do currency substitution. We can't join the EU, and with Trump, I don't think like Mexico and Canada are going to want to make the same currency with us. So I don't know. Like, we don't have a lot of options, I guess.
Any other questions? Thank you. Can you take a moment to introduce, she arrived a little late, Professor Claude Giroux, one of our colleagues. And, I would like to point out that the French elections are tomorrow. She is an expert, and she will be in ABC News tomorrow being interviewed as a commentator, is that correct? And also Al Jazeera, so got a preference there.
Who's going to win?
Yeah. We have our last presenter today. The new Trump.
Okay,
We don't, it's a little snafus today. We didn't have enough cups, and Nate's paper got lost in translation, in transition. But worry not, all papers will be posted on the lab within 2 weeks. So you can have as much access to them as you like. It's wonderful.
so this is Nate, everyone. So as was mentioned before, we have seniors, Nate and also Josh, are not actually graduating this May. We held them back. No, we didn't hold them back. It's actually successful, I promise. Right. So they'll be graduating in the next academic year. What makes Nate particularly unique in our program is Nate is not only an economics major, he works in the area of computer science. And let me also say that Nate's an entrepreneur. And so focusing on entrepreneurship and innovation is a big part of Nate's life. I think it would be his entire life if he had the opportunity to do that. And it will be. And Armando's talking about a lab sometime in the future. So Nate and entrepreneurship may achieve that. So Nate's focusing on innovation for society because it comes from his heart and where it leads him to. So Nate, it's all yours.
And he missed the party last night because he was working on his entrepreneurship.
I had to take a call.
All right, so anyway, hi everybody. My thesis is on innovation for society. So here's just a regular agenda. So to start with an introduction, technological innovation drives our economy. Research and development expenditures can serve as a proxy for innovation, and innovation, entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship create jobs. My hypothesis is increases in research and development expenditures increase the employment. So for literary analysis, for the first one, it draws some general conclusions about possible consequences of innovation and employment relationship. And for the second one, it shows that there's no empirical evidence to serve that there's an increase of innovation and productivity due to patents and such like that. So for data selection and methodology, I used FRED, which is the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, quarterly data from the period of 1947 to 2016, and there was 280 observations in the data set. For methodology, the expectation is increase in research and development expenditure may cause an increase in employment. Relationship is expected. So for the first one, this is a time plot that shows a time plot R&D expenditures over time. The second one is time plot showing employment, and then with the regression line, there is a relationship between R&D and employment for the third plot. So for this one, you can see that R&D has a positive impact on employment because the coefficients are positive, 2.24 and significant. However, my R squared value is really high. It's at 0.97, meaning that they might be positively related due to time. So that is why we're going to check the stationarity of the series and eliminate trends from the series. So in the levels, both variables are non-stationary. So when we take the first differences, both series become stationary, as you can see. In other words, we eliminated the trend effect. Therefore, I will use the first differences of the series. So then I ran another regression right here. This time I regressed the growth of employment on growth of R&D. Still, we find a positive and significant results in R squared, and it is definitely more reasonable down at 0.132. Yep. So anyway, in conclusion, based on these results, R&D expenditures have a positive impact on employment, which fosters economic growth. And research and development expenditures are positively correlated with job rates, which fosters economic development and growth as a whole. So, thank you.
Why did you do a log specification instead of level where?
I'm sorry, could you repeat
why did you do a log specification on that the first equation you had up there?
Log of variables.
Your model.
The first one? I'm actually not sure.
One more. Yeah, at the bottom.
Okay.
Everything I sent you is to that's a statement.
Oh yeah. So anyway.
So knowing this now, and you're an entrepreneur, what is it that you're looking to start contributing? What are you working on?
So you want the short story or the long story?
Whatever excites you, whatever. Because as a fellow entrepreneur, I'd love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what my startup is based off is fostering entrepreneurship as a whole, and innovation specifically in the technological field. So you have a lot of cases where, do you remember when Microsoft bought LinkedIn? Of course. A lot of people remember that.
It was like 20 billion or something.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. That kind of got me because I was like, LinkedIn had the opportunity to grow into a corporation in and of its own that could create more products that go forward that could compete with the titans like Microsoft and Apple. So when Microsoft buying up LinkedIn, it kind of removed the opportunity for such a great product. And while it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're doing that because they're eliminating possible competition from other sources, it's lowering the range that you as a consumer have for products. So in my startup, the whole point of it is that we are going to try to break down those barriers and develop products that can compete with the titans such as Microsoft and Apple, and create products that are better, if not on par with them, that consumers would find very unique.
Right. So it's sort of like in line with this book called Smart People Should Build Things, where they talk about how Mark Zuckerberg working for Wall Street it won't generate as much revenue for the economy as if he were to be in the position that he is now, generating millions or billions of dollars for Wall Street by running his own company. So it's kind of like,
I guess.
So you built R&D into your startup?
Yes, we have multiple departments within the startup that focus specifically on research going back to development. And then we have marketing that supports that development. So we keep pushing products forward with multiple departments that serve multiple purposes.
One factor, how do we deal with sweat equity? Because that's not necessarily reflected in actual R&D expenditure.
Yeah.
Right? It's how much are you paying yourself?
0. You have to. That's just the nature of the startup. And one of the reasons, like, if you want to go back to literary analysis right here. So what actually got me, and I was actually interested in this because we were looking into patents so greatly for our products, and patents there's no empirical evidence showing that patents actually improve innovation. So when you look into a patent, a lot of people, they kind of oversee like the legal rights to things like with intellectual property rights, copyrights, and patents. So it's very expensive to maintain a patent product. And as a result, a lot of startups are turned off by it. And it's why a lot of entrepreneurs take their new idea and they'll approach like a Microsoft or an Apple with it. And it'll just build up their, I don't want to say like their throne, but you know what I'm saying. Like it just builds up more of what they have. So.
Any other questions? Did you factor in a lab for A routing?
Go get your lab.
That's in future
What's up? Oh.
That's in the counter.
Come on, everybody. You gotta get us back.
Behind.
We'll switch off.
I got it.
Folks, thank you very much. That's the end of the program. Sending us the thank you. All right. We're done? Thank you. I know.
Really? Well, I be able to use like different types of technology to get me that. I'll build my own algorithm, learning into it. Yeah, that's actually
Senior, we got everyone together for a photo. And all the same without first, let's get everyone up front. Without first, and then we'll do what you guys can say on chat. It's over.